In this mini video series, we're looking at behavioral political economy. We're asking what fuels our bias in the political world. We've asked how we keep systematically wrong beliefs, and we provided a partial answer with confirmation bias. And we can ask what makes us systematically wrong in the first place. And we can think about availability bias and availability cascades. But now the third element, which doesn't cover everything that fuels our bias in the political world, but it's going to be what we cover in this little lecture series. The third element is our overconfidence. In this part of the lecture series, we'll see how these concepts of availability bias and confirmation bias all tie into and boost our third topic, overconfidence. We'll see overconfidence as the most important element of the three political biases that we've briefly touched on. We'll see the modern psychological underpinnings of our fatal conceit. So let's start with a little mental challenge to get us going on this topic. This is the B23 Flip Cards experiment from Richard Thaler's book, Misbehaving. In this game, you have 4 cards, A, B, 2, and 3 are showing. And your task is to turn over as few of cards as possible to verify whether the following statement is true. Every card with a vowel on one side has an even number on the other side. You have to decide in advance which cards you will examine. How many cards do you have to turn over and which cards are they? Pause for a minute and see if you can do this yourself. The correct answer to this is that you must flip over 3 cards. You must flip over the first card A, the second card B, and the last card 3. A, you have to flip over. You confirm that each vowel has an even number on the back. You look at the other side of A, and you confirm it's an even number there. And the statement can therefore be true if you get that evidence that there is an even number. You flip over B, and here you have a chance to disconfirm the statement. You look at the back of B, and if there is a vowel on the back of B, then the statement is not true. So you could disconfirm the statement. You flip over 3 as well for the same reason as B. You can disconfirm the statement. When you run this game experimentally, you get certain results. So you have people play this game and they report back which cards should be flipped over. The most popular response is to say flip over card A. The next most popular is to flip over 2. The next most popular is to flip over the 3 card. And the least most popular response is that people respond and say, you should flip over the B card. So we have the most popular is A and the least popular is B. What does this tell us when we run this experimentally? And this is the popularity of the responses from individuals playing this little mental challenge. It shows us that we're biased to search for confirming rather than disconfirming evidence. It's a little anecdote for us, a game that can just kind of represent this element for us, that we're biased to search for confirming rather than disconfirming evidence. Why? Well, let's think about this. What does 2 being a popular response tell us? Well, we want to flip over the 2, even though it's actually pointless. Notice, this is the only card you do not actually have to flip over. This is not part of the correct answer, and yet it is the second most popular response. This is a confirmation bias representation. You're looking to see that a 2 has a vowel on the back of it, confirming our view that vowels have even numbers. But if it doesn't have a vowel there, so what? The rules of the game never say that all even numbers have vowels on their back. It just says that vowels have even numbers. Right? If you think of confirmation bias, you can go back in our lecture series and realize that there's different elements of confirmation bias. And one of them is this failure to notice, right? And part of the failure to notice is that we search for confirming rather than disconfirming evidence. We try to seek out confirming evidence, whereas we're not looking for that disconfirming evidence. So here, in flipping over the 2, we're seeking out confirming evidence, even though it doesn't actually need to be done in order to answer the question as it is written. Note that flipping over the 2 shows us this bias towards seeking out confirming evidence. Now, what does the 3 being less popular than the A and 2 tell us? And what does the B being the least popular tell us? Well, we can think about this again. We are biased away from searching for disconfirming evidence. We don't think to flip over the B and the 3 as much, but because they can only disconfirm. We're eager to look for confirmation, even though it does not actually help us with the truth. Yet we are slow to seek out the disconfirmation, even though with one card, it could verify for us that we do not have the truth. Remember the element of the standard asymmetry as part of confirmation bias as well. That shows up here also. Many people make the unwarranted assumption that every card has a number on one side and a vowel on the other side. Perhaps you did this, where you say, oh, okay, A and B, there must be numbers on the back. 2 and 3, there must be letters on the back. This was never stated, but the assumption is an easy one to make, and many people do it. Not all, but many people do it, because we are not thinking about finding disconfirming evidence, like a vowel could be on the back of B. In this game, many go as far as applying a rule, numbers on one side and letters on the other, that actually rules out a chance of disconfirming evidence. There is this standard asymmetry in confirmation bias. It's the idea that people apply a higher standard of proof toward contradictory or disconfirming evidence. And we could argue that this game, this little setup here, this AB23 game, gives us an example of that in action. We interpret the situation to have a rule that allows us to seek out confirming evidence, but not disconfirming evidence. A concept that is highly related to confirmation bias is belief bias. Here, I'll give you an example of belief bias from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow on page 45. Imagine this situation. You have very little time. You're taking the LSAT to try and get into law school or some kind of test like this, and you have to determine if an argument is logically valid. So I'll show you this argument, and you try and quickly go through and say, is this argument actually logically valid? A large majority of college students endorse this syllogism as valid. When people believe a conclusion that some roses fade quickly, they tend to believe the arguments that appear to support it to be true. This is the idea of belief bias. Belief bias is the tendency to judge the strength of an argument based on the plausibility of their conclusion rather than how strongly they support that conclusion. Notice the tie to confirmation bias here. We're going to believe there is more evidence out there that supports our beliefs than there really is with this idea of belief bias. We're hardwired to confirm our beliefs, to look for confirming evidence, and even to avoid disconfirming evidence. We have a bias to overweight evidence that confirms, a bias to underweight evidence that disconfirms. And in the end, we get this result where we think we're right way more than we actually are. This is our overconfidence. And this is just some of the fuel that feeds our overconfidence. I'm not sure you need a definition of this because I'm sure you already know it, but overconfidence is people's subjective confidence in their own ability is greater than their actual or objective performance. Overconfidence is one of the most persistent findings in the psychological literature. As Nate Silver says in his book, The Signal and the Noise, perhaps the central finding of behavioral economics is that most of us are overconfident when we make predictions. This is our third element that shapes our superpower to be confidently wrong. It's putting the confident in the confidently wrong. To me, this is the real key to bringing all of this material together. Our rational irrationality, to use Brian Kaplan's method of thinking about the world, is shaped and skewed by availability cascades, our prior views, and our views once held are likely to be confirmed. But when you mix all of this together, our high quantity demanded for irrationality happens in our political views. And with all of these behavioral biases, you get an extreme and an important overconfidence. When you mix all of these concepts together, the idea of rational irrationality, availability bias, right? Confirmation bias, the belief bias that we have, we end up with this overconfidence. And when you have rational irrationality in politics, it would be rational for us to be irrationality, to feed the kind of desire to have our worldview actually be true. We can have these biases at play in our beliefs about politics because it always goes through something where we are not actually choosing the outcome. In the private sector, in markets, when we purchase something, if we go off to the store and we say, yes, I like Cocoa Puffs, and we buy Cocoa Puffs, we actually deal with those consequences. But when we go to the voting booth and we say, we like candidate A, we don't actually have to deal with those consequences because we just vote. And our vote has a very small probability of determining the actual outcome of the election. And so it doesn't really matter who we vote for in either way. So we're not actually facing the benefits of the voting behavior. And so we consume a lot of irrationality there. And we consume this idea that our biases, whatever they are, our worldviews, that's fine to hold. Those ideas, it's fine to have distortions there. And so we get this overconfidence in politics because we have a rational irrationality and lots of biases that can fuel our thinking about how the political world or the economic world actually works. Why does overconfidence matter in politics? Because we think we can actually do what we're pretending to do. Because we think we can actually do some things that in reality we are just pretending to do in politics. I believe this to be very related to the central lesson from economics, from Adam Smith's understanding of the invisible hand, and the Scottish Enlightenment, that order can be the result of human action, but not of human design. I believe this also to be very related to F.A. Hayek's claim about the actual task of economics. Quote, "The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design." These ideas of economics, the task of economics is to help us overcome this overconfidence in a particular way. We have a fatal conceit, as Hayek called it. We believe we can construct the economic world around us. In reality, many of our gains come from a bottom-up evolution and not a top-down solution. But we believe that we can design the society that we live in. We believe we can construct, or that we can know what should or could happen. We believe we can do it from the top down. How does behavioral economics help us understand this overconfidence, this fatal conceit? That's what we will just begin to touch on in the upcoming videos on overconfidence.